All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the League Express podcast. My name's Jake Kearnan, and joining me as always is the editor of League Express, Martyn Sadler. And Martyn, we're here, the final week of the season. It's a very bizarre feeling, isn't it?
It's really weird, isn't it? You sort of wonder what you're going to do. Mind you, having said that, we do have a test series coming up, and there's the Pacific Cup taking place down under, so there will still be quite a bit of rugby league, through to the end of this month and early into November. But you do wonder, what do we do in the off season, Jake? Can you remember?
No,
I'm not sure I can.
Well, from memory, mate, I think it was a pretty busy off season for us last year.
We kept going.
We had plenty to talk about,
and we will again. Yeah,
and I think you're right with the international rugby as well. Like, it just seems to prolong the action a little bit as well, which is great. I've got no complaints with rugby league in November.
No.
Play it right up until Christmas, I reckon.
We actually do play it on Boxing Day, mate, in England.
True.
There's always a game at Headingley with Leeds and one or two other games too. So it is still there. By the way, before we start, we ought to just say that last week we were going to have Gary Schofield on, but he went down with COVID. I'm delighted to say that Gary's now recovered from that setback, and I think he will be able to join us next week to talk about the Grand Final,
Awesome.
to reflect on the season and so on. So if Gary's watching, Gary, we'll look forward to seeing you next week, mate, and we'll no doubt have loads to talk about on that day, at that time.
And I think a lot of our listeners were commenting, saying "Get well soon, Gary."
Yes,
Plenty of nice messages of support.
Absolutely, yes. He's got a lot of avid followers, Gary.
A cult following.
Yeah.
All right, mate. Well, let's get into the matches that took place over the weekend. We'll start on Friday night. Obviously, we had Hull KR defeating Warrington 10 points to 8, which was a real nail biter.
Well, certainly the best game of the weekend, wasn't it? It was a nail biter. Hull KR winning 10-0, Warrington fighting back to 10-8. But the crucial thing was Josh Thewlis couldn't convert the tries, which sort of goes to prove once again how important goal kickers are in rugby league, doesn't it? A 2-point margin, couldn't have been much closer. There was a controversial Hull KR try that might or might not have been given, but which went up to the video referee as a try, and the video referee couldn't find a way to turn it down, could he?
And we will get into that try a little bit later, but do you think for them having that Friday night match for Hull KR, do you think having that extra day will help them in the grand final
Not
next
a
weekend?
great deal. Wigan have got 7 days after beating Leigh on Saturday, and I think that's quite enough for any team, really, to be honest, Jake. I don't think it'll matter. It won't matter a fig, really, when it comes to the grand final.
Now, I guess that big talking point of the Joe Burgess try, when you saw it live, Martyn, what were your initial thoughts?
Well, I thought I did see it touch the ground over the line, but I may have been seeing things. I can't say that I definitely did. But the referee was nearer than anybody else, wasn't he? The referee actually, when you look at it, was on the spot. So if he thought it was a try but just needed to be reassured that it was, then there's no alternative but to award it. But as very often happens, though, we often find these situations, don't we, where there's a reference to the video referee. The video referee looks at it, and there's no angle from the cameras that absolutely confirms one way or the other. You can't, bodies are in the way, all sorts of things are in the way, and you can't see precisely what happened. And that was the case there. Well, in that case, the only alternative is to stick with what the referee called and recognise that the referee was on the spot. So I don't really have any complaints about that decision. But, of course, a lot of people reacted to Joe Burgess at the end of the game. You must have seen him when Brian Kearney asked him whether he really did score. He said yes, and then pulled out his Pinocchio nose. Well, that obviously set up quite a few fans sort of, and we've had a letter or two in the League Express this week from disconsolate fans saying, well, he was clearly he claimed the try, but it clearly wasn't a try. But that's not the case. Every player, when he gets the ball and gets over the line, thinks he's scored a try. I think Joe Burgess has a great sense of humour. That's the trouble.
Yeah.
And you can see that from the way he talks. He's obviously a very humorous guy, and likes to take the mickey a bit, doesn't he?
Yeah.
And he did in that case, I think.
I was watching that and I thought to myself, either Joe Burgess is a really honest man, or he just couldn't pass up the opportunity to make his the pundits laugh.
No.
So yeah, a bit of entertainment there. Post-match, I'm sure the Warrington fans were sitting there seething in their seats at home.
Yes.
But I don't know, mate.
I think he might get booed at Warrington when they play there next year.
Yeah, I'm sure he won't mind if he's got a ring on his finger after winning Old Trafford. But
at all.
We'll see. I think the one thing with that instance, it's really tough too, because obviously the video ref has to go with what the on-field referee has decided in that instance. As you said, we don't have as many camera angles as you would in the NRL to try and pinpoint where it has touched the ground. A few fans were saying that they were annoyed that Liam Moore seemed to be continuing to search for grounding after he'd been held up and then decided that it was a try. Their argument was, well, if he saw grounding, he wouldn't be looking for another grounding.
Could be true. I mean, I've not studied Liam Moore's body language that carefully, so that could be right. I'm not so sure. But the interesting thing is, with the potential changes in the video refereeing system next year, where the referee might go to the video referee without giving a decision himself, would that try then have been given? If it had gone with no recommendation from the ref, I suspect that the video referee might not have given it, because then, of course, the onus goes on to the video referee to only award the try if there's clear evidence that it has been scored. So I think, that sort of small change in protocol does potentially make a big difference. And Warrington might have won that game. Who knows?
Yeah, potentially. But one man who wasn't blaming the officials was the Warrington coach Sam Burgess, mate. In his post-match presser, I believe he said that we shouldn't be giving Joe Burgess that opportunity to score the try on the line like that.
No, he was very critical of his own soft defence near the line, wasn't he? And you could see why. He was a bit frustrated that, you should never be conceding tries like that so close to the line. Although Joe Burgess, having said that, is a big, forceful guy, isn't he? To stop Joe Burgess when he's just a few metres from the line it's a big effort, mate. And I wouldn't like to have to do it myself. Put it that way.
No, absolutely. It's like the modern day winger; they just keep getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah, they do.
But yeah, so great to see. I guess Sam not taking the easy way out and blaming the officials. And
that shows that the interesting thing about that, Jake, you're absolutely right, and it showed the definition of mental weakness is blaming other people for your own failings, and if Sam demonstrated, I think, that he's actually a mentally very strong guy by not blaming the referees, not blaming anybody else, but just sort of taking it on the chin and saying we didn't play well enough to win the game, even though it was such a close one. I mean, they did play very well, but just didn't quite pull it off, did it? And Hull KR did really well because, of course, they were lacking their captain, Elliot Minchella. So I thought that with him not being there, I'd gone into that game thinking Warrington might well win it. And it's great that Minchella can come back for the grand final, because obviously the camera kept going to him. If you saw the game on TV, the camera kept going to Minchella sitting in the stand, and you could sort of see him thinking, oh my God, I wish I was out there. But fortunately they did it without him. And I'll tell you who I think has been a great player this year, totally underrated, and that is Dean Hadley for Hull KR. I think he stepped in at loose forward for Minchella in that game. But I think he does so many good things, does Dean Hadley, and if they're going to win against Wigan, I think he'll play a key role. It's funny because Dean Hadley, like a lot of guys who sort of lose their hair prematurely, probably looks older than he really is. It's just unfortunately, people think of that, and I think he really deserved to be in England squad to play to face Samoa this year, given the way he's played. I think he certainly wouldn't let the side down. So I'm a great fan of Dean Hadley, and I really do think that that he deserves an awful lot of praise, and I'm sure he gets it from the Hull KR fans.
Yeah, definitely.
But from a wider perspective, I think he deserves an awful lot of praise.
I'm sure Elliot Minchella was sitting there thinking, I owe all of these boys a beer after getting us and giving him the chance to play at Old Trafford next week.
Absolutely.
This week. All right, mate. So just to quickly finish on that match, when you look at the Warrington season as a whole, do you think Sam Burgess is quite happy with where they got to this year?
Well, you're never happy when you've just been knocked out of something. I think we said that last week about Salford, that Salford had a good season, but as their coach Paul Rowley said straight after the game, they might have had a good season, but you're still cheesed off that you've just lost and your season's over. So Sam will be cheesed off that his season's now over. But on reflection, to get to the last four compared to what they'd done previously was a good outcome, really, to finish third in the league and to be so near to getting through to Old Trafford. You can't say that's a bad outcome, even though it feels it. It's a raw feeling when you've just been beaten. But no, I think Sam's done a great job, and I think they'll strengthen next year. Obviously, there will be comings and goings, and I'm pretty sure that Warrington will be stronger next year than they were this year.
I guess it's safe to say that risk of appointing him as coach has certainly paid off.
Well, yes. I mean, the risk now, of course, is losing him to the NRL. Because obviously everybody will have noticed, and in that sense, if I were Warrington, I'd almost be relieved that I wasn't at Old Trafford, because if they got there and won it, I think there'd have been an awful lot of an enormous clamour for Sam's services back in the NRL.
Yes. It'd be interesting to hear Warrington's fans take. I'm sure they'd do anything to get their hands on the trophy, but to lose Sam also would be a double blow.
Absolutely.
All right, mate, we'll move on to Saturday night's matchup. We had Wigan defeating Leigh 38 points to 0 in what was a very big scoreline in the end.
Yes, a big disappointment, really, that it was so one-sided. I mean, you've got to admire Wigan. They are so professional, so smart, such a great rugby league team. They really are. And they were too strong for Leigh. Leigh had key players missing. Obviously, Kai O'Donnell, they'd been hoping that he would be able to play, but he got that problem, with a kidney problem that had been banged on the kidney in a previous game and couldn't recover in time. And of course, they were missing Frankie Halton, who'd been, who was out of the game with the concussion protocols, and Josh Charnley was missing as well, which after he had that neck problem, having been taken off the field on a stretcher the previous weekend. So it was difficult for Leigh. It was Leigh don't have a strong squad in depth, do they? Certainly not compared to Wigan. I mean, Wigan had Liam Farrell missing with a virus, but they were able to bring in Sam Walters, who scored 2 tries, to replace him. Sam had been the 18th man, I think, the previous week, and they've got quality like that they can bring in when a key player is missing. So, it was always likely to be a Wigan win, but I'd just been hoping it would be a lot closer than it was. But 18-0 at half-time. And then, of course, it was Aaron Penny, wasn't it, who lost the ball in the first tackle in the second half, and Wigan, got the ball and scored again to make it 24-0 at the beginning of the second half. Well, game over, really, wasn't it? But there was still time for tries from Bevan French, that incredible individual effort, great footwork, superb kick through the defence and picking up to score, and then Jay Field running for a long distance try, and great to watch, but probably not so much for the Leigh fans, I don't suppose.
Yeah, that field try where he just put the foot on the gas and absolutely burnt the Leigh's right edge. I couldn't believe it. He just
something for Hull KR to ponder.
Yeah,
I think.
And I think he's been dealing with some hamstring injuries of late too. So great to see him back in full flight.
Yes. Well, I've suggested that if Hull KR want to win this the grand final, they might want to find a way of transferring Liam Farrell's virus to Field and French to keep them out of the game.
Put them in close
I think
quarters.
that's what I'd be trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And that French try, that was just like a classic example of, something you'd see, growing up in your backyard. You can't really
completely
teach
off
that,
the cuff, completely unpredictable.
Yeah,
and that's Bevan French, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just a great player.
And I guess looking forward, I think the one thing that stuck out to me when Jenna Brooks was going around doing all the post-match interviews, I thought, you just forget how many stars there are in this Wigan team.
Absolutely, yeah.
Obviously, Junior Nsemba was devastating with some of his carries. He had a few big carries through the middle too, where he had defenders hanging off of him, and he was always bumping off that first contact. In many ways, he is the star breakout performer of 2024, isn't he? Junior Nsemba. He was probably little known. I mean, he did play quite a number of games. He played too many games in 2023 to be still regarded as a rookie this year. But he was mainly coming off the bench. But now he's an established starter, and his stock has risen throughout the season. And he's a massive danger this year. This weekend, isn't he, for Hull KR? Definitely. And same with Leigh. Looking back at their season, do you think they look at this as a successful season, considering what they went through?
Well, they've got farther than they've ever got before. Last year, they won the Challenge Cup, of course, but they got knocked out in the first week of the playoffs when they went to Hull KR. Yeah. This week, they went to this year they went to Salford and beat them in the first week, but just obviously the trip to Wigan was too much for them. And it was interesting watching that game, because I think I've written in League Express this week that I just got the feeling when you saw Leigh coming out onto the field led by John Asiata, I thought John Asiata looked incredibly nervous, and he sort of almost had his eyes shut. You always got the feeling he was saying a prayer, which is, if he's a religious guy, he would do, I suppose. But they didn't really look confident, and when you play Wigan, you can't afford to be nervous. If you're nervous against Wigan, they will exploit that nervousness and force you into making mistakes. And I think I've, the game that I always remember where Wigan were beaten in a big game was the 1998 Challenge Cup final. Obviously, you weren't around in those days. But that was when Sheffield Eagles sprang the biggest ever Challenge Cup final shock by beating Wigan 17-8. And I can still remember that they were coached by John Keir, the Eagles. And John Keir, nobody has John Keir's expertise in motivating a side as a coach. John Keir was, and probably still is, absolutely exceptional at making a side believe in itself. And when the two teams came out in 1998, side by side into the tunnel at Wembley, you could see that Wigan were fairly relaxed, didn't really, were looking around a bit, expected to win, thought it would be a bit of a formality. But the Sheffield side, led by their captain, Paul Broadbent, came out looking daggers drawn, and they were sort of so focused and sort of looking across at the Wigan players as though they'd like to kill them, basically. And, they walked out looking so determined, and you thought, my God, these guys are really up for it. These guys are really up for it this year. And it turned out that they won, and it was incredible. And you've got to be like that to play against Wigan. You've got to come out totally focused, dedicated, and determined to beat these guys who are walking by your side. And let's see whether we see that on Saturday.
No, definitely. I'm sure Willie Peters will be doing everything he can to motivate his side for that one. But
no doubt about it. Yes, yeah.
All right, mate. We'll also touch on the Women's Super League Grand Final was played on Sunday. I believe you and I have only really seen the highlights of that match. But yeah, York defeating Saints 18 points to 8.
And they were a weakened York side as well. And that's only St Helens' second defeat of the season, the first one having been at York right at the start of the season. So a bit of a shock for St Helens. But, a really fine game. As you say, I've not seen the whole game yet, but great to see York doing so well. It looked as though St Helens were going to dominate Women's Rugby League this season for much of it. They won the Challenge Cup, of course. But a great win for York. And, York have really put a lot into Women's Rugby League, haven't they? They've really put a focus on it. And York is probably the club, probably more than any other, where the women's team is very much the equivalent of the men's team, if not valued more highly. And it showed, didn't it? It just terrific, and congratulations to them. It's a game I'm actually going to watch later in the week. I've got it obviously recorded, but what a terrific result for them. 18 points to 8, and and a hell of a shock. The Saints players, some marvellous photographs of the St Helens girls looking absolutely devastated at the end, and they'll no doubt come back again next year.
And it looked like there was a pretty healthy crowd.
Nearly 5,000
as well.
Nearly 5,000, yeah.
And
which is great to see, isn't it?
Yeah, and for York,
good on the St Helens fans.
Yeah, and for York to go there, and it's like an away game for them, you could say. I guarantee most of the crowd was probably St Helens fans. To go there and beat them in their home stadium,
brilliant! Yeah.
It's a great effort.
And one thing, by the way, as well, we've while we're talking about Women's Rugby League, it was interesting that Leigh won the playoff game to play in the Women's Super League next year. Leigh have won the championship, and they beat Featherstone Rovers 34 points to 16, also at St Helens on Sunday. So Leigh will now take Featherstone's place in the Women's Super League, and quite frankly, I think they'll give the others quite a big challenge. Yeah. Leigh are determined to do well in Women's Rugby League, and they'll be formidable competitors, I think.
No, I'm sure Derek Beaumont would be very pleased to see them getting into the Women's Super League as well.
No doubt about it. Yeah, he's been very supportive of the women of at Leigh, and it's great to see them doing so well.
Oh, absolutely. All right, mate, we'll move into some of the NRL results. Obviously, we had the grand final taking place on Sunday morning, our time. Penrith, they've done it again, 4 in a row, defeating Storm.
4 in a row, yeah.
14-6.
Yes, it's interesting, isn't it? That we had that famous St George side in the 1950s and 60s winning the title 11 years in a row. Obviously, Penrith are not yet halfway to doing that. And they're going to lose a lot of players this year to, obviously Jerome Luai going to West Tigers, Fisher Harris going to New Zealand Warriors. Really key losses there. But who's to say they won't do it again? It wasn't a thrilling game, was it? The NRL Grand Final. It was an attritional game. Not many great highlights. In fact, there was an AFL presenter, I think, who denigrated the NRL Grand Final, saying there were virtually no highlights in it.
As expected.
As well as expected,
from
yes.
AFL commentator.
And of course, their Grand Final was a totally one-sided affair. But there was something in that. The problem is, Jake, that is... The problem with rugby league is that if you've got two teams playing against each other, two very good teams that don't make any mistakes at all, or virtually no mistakes, the game can become very attritional, with no clean breaks, not many complex passing movements. It can just become a game of, two sides trying to wear each other down. And that's not really as attractive as we'd like it to be. And I think the NRL Grand Final this year, from what I've seen of it, seemed to fall into that category. It wasn't, for example, last year when the Broncos gave away that incredible, gave away all those points to Penrith to win the game late on. That was a much more thrilling game with some spectacular movement, great tries, That wasn't the case this year, was it?
There was a lot of tries from broken play. I know Ezra Mann busted through a few times and scored his hat-trick.
And very often, if a rugby league game is going to be spectacular, which we all would like to see it, then a lot of the spectacular moments arise from broken play. But of course, if there isn't much broken play, that means that sort of thing won't happen. And it didn't happen in the NRL Grand Final this year.
Yeah.
So it was, there's a lot to think about. I think the thing is that the people who make the laws of the game have got to keep one step ahead of the coaches, and we need to find ways to bring, to ensure that the game, even between the two best teams in the land, can still be a spectacular game with spectacular ball movement. I mean, as I think we've said before, I've promoted the idea that we ought to give a greater reward for tries that are scored from a play the ball inside your own half. Encourage teams to attack from deep, for example. And we all, at the end of the day, we all like to think we know a fair bit about rugby. We talk about rugby league being sometimes a game for the purists, but actually we all really like games that are open and spectacular, and that's what we'd like to see more of. And I'd like to see more teams encouraged to attack from inside their own half, to throw the ball inside their own half, and maybe by giving more points, 5 or even 6 points for a try scored from inside their own half. I mean, if you imagine the NRL Grand Final, it was an 8-point margin at the end. Imagine if you could score 6 points from a try generated from a play the ball in your own half with 2 points for a conversion. Melbourne could still have been trying to do that right to the end of the game. And as the game nears its end, in fact, that would have been their only way to win it. So they would have to have tried to do that, wouldn't they?
Throw it around a bit.
Yeah.
And it's hard too because you look at the way the Storm are coached and look at the way the Panthers are coached. They're very, very similar sort of coaching style. Completion rates. Make sure there's no errors.
Yes.
And you saw late in that match players, on all fours, hunched over, that you've never seen hunched over, like your Liam Martins. You saw Harry Grant sort of, on his knees at one point, sucking in the big ones. It was just a brutal physical match, which some people do enjoy watching. Personally, I like seeing a bit of attacking flair.
So do I. And of course, you might say that Melbourne lost it the week before when Nelson Asafa-Solomona was suspended. Probably rightly so, for a high tackle in their playoff game against the Roosters. But once he was not going to play, it became a very difficult task for the Storm.
And a lot of people are saying, well, how can one player have that much of an impact on your side?
Crikey.
But when you look at Big Nas, it's not so much what he does when he carries the ball up or what he does defensively. It's when Storm are attacking the line. And if you're Harry Grant at hooker there and you're right next to the post, the best thing you can have as a hooker is Nelson Asafa-Solomona, running that hard line, crashing at the post.
Absolutely.
And if he decides to hit Nelson, or if he decides to go at the back to, Cam Munster, whatever Nelson's done there, he's drawn in 3 defenders to try and stop him regardless of whether he gets the ball or not.
Absolutely.
Which creates space out wide. So, devastated he couldn't play, but as we said, he probably deserved the suspension. But one question I wanted to ask you, Martyn, is it's been, 5 grand finals in a row now for Penrith. You look at that starting front row of Fisher Harris and Moses Leota. Are they one of the greatest front row pairings we've ever seen?
They've got to be. Gosh, you judge players by how much success they have. And when 2 players like that can be there throughout that period and they have so much success, they've got to be unmatchable. But it's not just them. Liam Martyn, I think, is a great player. My gosh, he's an aggressive guy. He's got the sort of aggression that would probably go pretty well in a boxing ring, I would think. He must be awful to play against. And obviously scored a try himself just at the end of the first half to put Penrith back in the lead. No, I mean, what an absolutely great player, and what a great pack they have.
Yeah, that's
and it will be broken up, as we say, with Fisher Harris going to New Zealand Warriors next year, and obviously hoping that that they'll be hoping that he can do the same for them.
Yeah.
That he's done for Penrith.
It's almost sad to see, that partnership being broken up with him and Leota because of how successful they've been. But I'm sure a lot of NRL clubs are thankful.
Absolutely.
But yes, mate. I think the comparisons would be like Petro Sevenasiva and Shane Webke back in the day for the Broncos.
Yeah.
4 premierships, you can't really go past that.
It's just a shame that we can't sort of have that battle, isn't it, between those guys? Just if those guys could suddenly come back as they were as players and face the the Penrith team today, it would be incredible.
Oh, absolutely, mate. All right, in some of the other matchups, we had the NRLW taking place. The Roosters defeating the Sharks,
which was actually a much better game to watch, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny, really, because the Roosters took a massive early lead, and it looked to be a totally one-sided game.
They got it to about 24 points to 0, I think.
Playing brilliantly, yeah. And then Cronulla just came back and very nearly won it at the end. And at the end we're a bit unlucky not to be able to complete that revival. But I think the final score was 32-28. So if you want to see a really exciting game, go and watch that one. It was terrific.
And the match before as well, the state championship, which sees the Queensland Cup winner versus the New South Wales Cup winner. That was also a very tight game. The North Devils won that 20 points to 18 over the Newtown Jets.
Yes, they only won it in the last few minutes, didn't they? They'd been behind all game, and they finally triumphed near the end. And a great win for them, I think.
No,
again, that's a game I'm going to watch as hopefully as the week goes on.
Yeah. No, so much rugby to bloody watch, and hard to watch it all.
Yeah, it is.
Especially with how early those games kicked off for us.
Yeah,
I couldn't get up out of my bed at 3 a.m.
Absolutely,
to start those,
almost. There's almost too much rugby on TV these days, isn't there?
Yeah, that's right.
Can we have a bit less, please?
Yeah. Oh no. Well, I'd hate to have less, mate. Or what I watch during the week.
Yeah.
All right, mate. So, in some news, Man of Steel Award's going to be announced tonight, I believe.
Yeah, Mikey Lewis is likely to win that, I think.
Yeah, that's your pick of the night.
I'd have thought that they would give it to him. Yeah.
Who do you think's going to be the runner-up?
Well, I would think probably Mark Sneed, but who knows? But I think they only name the winner, don't they? I don't think they name who who's come second. I mean, it's a joint second, probably between Sneed and Dufty. Those are the 3 nominees, anyway.
And
the same 3 who were the top 3 in the Albert Goldthorpe medal. We said last week that I don't think this is the right way to pick the Man of Steel. Yeah. I mean, you've got various players who are not in the final 3, who are really great players. Bevan French being an obvious example. Edwin Apapi, I think, has been great. I even mentioned a guy like Dean Hadley earlier. Who'd be an unlikely winner, but not particularly expected to win. But I think he's given some real Man of Steel performances this year. So, but anyway, that's what it is. Mikey Lewis will be a great holder of that trophy if and when he does win it.
Absolutely. And the Coach of the Year, mate, we've got the 4 nominees: Matty Peet, Willie Peters, Paul Rowley, or Mike Eccles. Who would be your pick?
Well, at the moment, probably Willie Peters out of those 4, simply because I think what he's done with Hull KR to get them to a grand final is an incredible achievement. Of course, the trouble is we're picking it before the grand final itself, and if Wigan win on Saturday, then Matty Peters swept everything before him. So you've got to say Matty Peet has done a fantastic job, and on the basis that you reward winners, then he would have to get it. But I think Willie Peters has done some great things this year and shown himself to be a very, very smart operator. And, I'd be very happy to see him win it as well.
Is it fair to say that maybe Sam Burgess and Adrian Lamb hard done by not to be nominated?
A bit, yeah, but, I suppose it just sort of shows that there are some pretty good coaches in Super League, doesn't it?
No, absolutely. Now, mate, last week after we filmed the episode, you went along to the Gould Vikings launch. What took place there, and what did you make of it all?
We're very impressed. Gould is a thriving small town, actually. Right, it's the major inland port in this country, in fact, and it's got a lot of major companies locating there, and it's a growth area. But more importantly for us, it's halfway between Hull and West Yorkshire. So Scott Taylor's going to be the new full-time coach. They're already recruiting players like Jamie Shaw, Tom Minns, he's joined them, Tom Halliday from Doncaster. They're putting together a very respectable team that will certainly hold its own in the League One next year. They're certainly not going to be there just to make up the numbers, put it that way. And Scott Taylor's a great guy, I think, very, very dedicated rugby league, former very, very fine player, but I'm quite certain he'll make a damn good coach as well. So I think they've got everything going for them. And, of course, they're located in an area where they've got fairly easy access to players, from either Hull or from West Yorkshire. And they've got the town behind them. They had a guy called Phil Jones from the Gould Town Council, one of the leaders of industry business in the town of Gould. I think there's a lot of people getting behind them. They've got a £7 million scheme to improve the Victoria Pleasure Ground Stadium where they're going to be playing. So it's very difficult to find fault with Gould Vikings, and I just wish them well and hope that they are successful.
No, absolutely, mate. It would be great to see them go far in the season.
It would
next year, and obviously return that faith in the RFL for giving them that.
I hope so. Yes.
So, but we also had some other news in Super League, mate. Sam Tompkins, he's re-signed with Catalans for one more season.
Yes.
Surprised by this news, considering he came out of retirement this year?
Well, not surprised. Not surprised in one sense, because I know how much Sam loves playing the game. And once you retire for a long time, aren't you? So, Sam's still got that knee that's not in perfect condition, but he's so dedicated, and he's since going to the south of France, Sam has become almost a naturalised French citizen. He's taken to the French way of life really well. I was sat next to him at an event earlier this year, and he was saying how much he loves it down there. It's a great place to live, Jake. Actually, to be fair, and he's determined to do everything he can to bring the Dragons back to greatness, because of course they missed out on the playoffs this year, and they don't want to do that again. So I think Steve McNamara is under some pressure there for the. And of course they've got Lauren Fraser, who probably going back there as the assistant coach to Steve. Hopefully that'll strengthen them, and there'll be a great combination. So I'm not that surprised, and I think we'll watch with interest to see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And they'll have a few more recruits coming in next year as well. Obviously, Elliot Whitehead returns.
Absolutely, yeah. Still a really fine player.
Yes, so expect them to be a bit of a force next year.
Luke Keary, very smart player.
Yeah, most definitely. All right, mate, Mal Meninga, he's named his Australian side for the Pacific Championship. There's some notable names missing. I'll just run through a few names. There's no Daly Cherry Evans. There's no James Tedesco. No Jake Trebojevic. Obviously, no Nathan Cleary. We expect he'll get his shoulder surgery. No Cam Munster. I believe he might be doing some off-season procedures as well. But there's some new faces as well. Mitch Barnett, Bradman Best, Xavier Coates, Tom Dearden, Mitch Moses, Reece Robson and Lindsay Smith will all be debuting.
They still look a good side, don't they?
Yeah.
A good squad. And they're going to be playing against a New Zealand squad that's also missing some key players, notably Nelson Asafa-Solomona, who can't play because he's suspended. And that raises another point for me, Jake. If you're suspended in one competition, should your suspension carry over to a quite different competition where you're playing for a different team in an international context? I don't think it should. I think an individual suspension should only count in the competition in which it was imposed. But
I agree.
That's just my view.
Because it's sort of it's disheartening when you see players miss an Origin game because of an NRL fixture or
Absolutely.
Vice versa.
Yeah. Well, Nelson, I think he ought to be in the New Zealand Pacific Cup side, and obviously there would have been much stronger if they'd been able to include him.
No, definitely. And a lot of people do think that the punishment he received, we understand he probably deserves some form of suspension, but would he get 4 or 5 weeks?
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are saying it's a bit uncalled for.
A bit tough, yeah.
But yes, really looking forward to that kicking off. And
by the way, in the New Zealand squad, they have picked the sole representative from Super League, Peter Hiku, from Hull KR. He's in the New Zealand squad. There's no other Super League player in any of the 3 Pacific Cup squads because Tonga have selected their squad, and it's made up entirely of NRL players.
Oh, interesting. Well, congratulations to Peter Hiku. He probably deserves it after a fine
great
performance
season for Hull KR. Yes,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. Let's hope he doesn't get injured this weekend and can still go out there.
Mate, touch wood. All right, we'll turn our focus to this weekend's grand final matchup at Old Trafford. Ticket sales wise, how many tickets do you think they'll sell?
Well, I think we all hope that they'll get up to 70,000. Somebody was saying to me the other day that they'll be glad if they get 65,000. I wouldn't be too glad at that. Last year it was 58,000 with the Catalans there, and obviously the Catalans didn't bring that many players. The problem is that they only have less than a week to sell the tickets because we get the semi-finals and then the grand final the following weekend. I think there should be a 2-week gap personally to encourage more ticket sales. If you look at the NFL, the Super Bowl, there's always a 2-week gap between the championship finals and the Super Bowl. And the great thing about that is that it enables the teams in the first week to do all the media duties, and in the second week to do all the preparation for the game itself. There isn't enough media access. When it's only a week between the 2 games, there's not enough media access. And I've written before that we should be having a fortnight of big games. The Challenge Cup final should be on week 1, followed by the grand final the following week. And I think that would make a much better end of season.
Yeah, I agree. And another great point with that is with injuries and concussion protocols, it would allow people who did, potentially sustain a concussion, that opportunity to play.
Absolutely,
2 weeks
yeah.
later,
that's another interesting point to make, yeah.
Say if it was Leigh and the Josh Charnley thing would happen over the weekend and they were to make it through to the grand final with that 2-week break, Charnley would be free to play. So
absolutely.
Another thing we hope the RFL considers going forward.
Well, yes.
But yes, we'll see.
But you never know. They do respond. They do respond to some things, and you've got to give them credit for that. But there are some major changes to the structure of the season that I think would really help, and I'd love to persuade them to go for it. Yeah.
And we also had some news this week. I think in the Daily Telegraph, the Panthers CEO Brian Fletcher was saying that they're not willing to play in a World Club Challenge fixture, regardless of whether it's in Australia, over in Vegas.
No.
They think it's going to be too big of a match before the Vegas fixtures.
And this sort of, again, it shows the lack of dots being joined up in rugby league across. We only have 2 major rugby league competitions in the world. You'd think it would be really easy to coordinate them, wouldn't you? And to do it properly. And it's great going to Las Vegas. Everybody is really looking forward to that again, I'm sure. And, great that Penrith are going to be there. But the World Club Challenge, it's on and then it's off. You're never quite sure whether it's going to be on or not. And it's very frustrating that, for me, it should be played 2 weeks after our grand final. It should, the idea of playing the World Club Challenge the following season is a flawed one anyway, because the teams have changed in that period and so on. Let's have a complete rethink about the way the season works in both hemispheres and get some coordination.
Well, you're right, because say Panthers were to play in that fixture, there'd be no Jerome Luai, there'd be no James Fisher-Harris.
Of course not. No.
So, yeah, I'm a big believer in it should be a week or two after the grand final,
Yes,
probably
absolutely.
2 weeks. But yes, anyway, now looking at this weekend's matchup, mate, who is your prediction? Or what's your prediction for this week?
You've got to go for Wigan because, Wigan are just an outstanding rugby league team. They're coming to the boil at exactly the right time, as they always do. They've got some star players throughout the side, as you said earlier. It's almost impossible to, for me at least, to see them not winning. But what I'm just hoping is that Hull KR get off to a good start, don't fall behind early on, because Wigan will try and put 2 tries on in the first 10 minutes, I'm fairly sure. So Hull KR have got to survive the first 10 minutes, the first 20 minutes, and then start getting into the game. Let's not forget that it's not that long ago that Hull KR travelled to Wigan and lost 24-20, and that was after they'd been winning 20 points to 12, but they had 2 players sin-binned, and that stymied them, didn't it? So obviously Hull KR need to make sure that they've got 13 men on the pitch throughout the game. They want to make sure that they don't give away penalties and that they don't make, unforced errors, basically. Even forced ones, but unforced ones in particular. They've got to be on top of their game. It's got to be the best Hull KR side that takes to the field on Saturday. They've got to be single-minded, determined, as I've said earlier. Take a tip from what Sheffield did in 1998, and they're still not bound to win. Because Wigan may just have that quality that takes them through. But what we must hope for is a really tight game that's really. Is my phone going off? Let me just.
You're right.
Let me just see if I can tell them to go away. There we go.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. But no, I just can't see Hull KR winning, but I can see Hull KR playing well. But still not winning.
Yeah, the mindset has to be we're going to go in and bash Wigan, and they have to do it defensively.
Yeah,
they have to kick to the corners and try and keep them there. And it all starts from the kickoff too. I think if I was Willie Peters, I'd want to be kicking off and then try and set that tempo.
Absolutely,
with the line speed and try and bash them.
It's going to be a real interesting battle, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Now. It's the Rob Burrow Award now, isn't it, for the man of the match?
It is the Rob Burrow Award.
Do you have an early prediction for that one, mate?
Well, you've got to say Bevan French, haven't you? That he must be the favourite to win it. But obviously Michael Lewis is going to be in contention. Jay Field, Junior and Samba, and who knows? Very often it's a surprise winner, not somebody who you might expect to see. We've got a readers' poll this week in which we do list 6 names, but we give the voters a chance to say it could be a player other than those 6. We've got Jay Field, Bevan French, Mikey Lewis, Tyrone May, Elliot Minchella, and Junior and Semba, or a player other than those 6. So let's see what we come up with.
Yeah, it's hard to say, isn't it? Because Liam Marshall could score a hat trick, and be in the
perfectly capable.
Yeah. It's so hard to pick. All right, mate. Well, anything else you want to touch on before we get out of here today?
Well,
mate?
we just want to say in the championship, we ought to just mention that.
Yeah.
There is something very important to mention in the championship. This weekend, the championship games will be Wakefield versus York and Toulouse versus Bradford on Sunday. And the thing about that Wakefield game is we might see a new record because Max Jowett, the Wakefield fullback, has scored 484 points this season and is only 12 behind the all-time record holder for points in a season, which is Lewis Jones in 1956-57. And if Max Jowett can score 12 or more points, 12 points he'll equal Lewis Jones's record. More than that, he'll become the new record holder. And if Max Jowett can score 16 points in his final 2 games, he will become the first ever player to score 500 points in a rugby league season.
Wow,
which would be an amazing record to hold, wouldn't it?
Especially like in the modern day, like to score 500.
Absolutely,
against the quality.
I mean, the one thing that helps that in a sense is that Lewis Jones played in the days when tries were only worth 3 points, and obviously now they're worth 4. But it's still an incredible achievement, and we need to keep a very close eye on that one. And interesting, Wakefield versus York, Toulouse versus Bradford are the 2 games on Sunday, and the grand final will probably be, if Wakefield beat York, they'll host the grand final against Toulouse or Bradford. And the other final thing to say is we had a shock result in the League One playoff final. Hunslet travelling to Keighley Cougars and winning 20 points to 6. And Hunslet now travel to Swinton on Sunday night, kick-off at 7 o'clock. I'm cursing that kick-off time because it means we won't be able to feature it in the paper because we have a print time that doesn't allow us to get that game in. So we'll be putting that game, the match report from that game onto the website, but not into the paper.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, big game for Swinton and Hunslet, and to see who plays in the Championship and who plays in League One next year.
Yeah, massive game. But mate, we're all set for another weekend full of rugby league action, even
Absolutely.
if there isn't anything happening in the Southern Hemisphere.
Yeah.
But are you going to try and head along to Old Trafford?
Oh yes,
Saturday
yes,
night,
of course,
mate?
yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right, mate. Well, we'll remind our viewers and listeners, if you do want to get your subscription to League Express, scan the QR code across the screen or head along to totalrl.com/shop. You can also pick up your...
Get the paper from the newsagent. Yeah, absolutely.
Well.
That's the...
And the Rugby League World
issue.
magazine as well, this month's
Absolutely.
edition. Make sure you get your hands on that. We did have some questions in the comment section last week, just asking if they could get this in the shop. This is only through
subscription
the
only, yes.
website. Yeah,
It
so
is.
if you want to grab your copy of the magazine, head along to totalrl.com/shop and they'll redirect you, I think.
Absolutely.
But yeah, mate, all right, we'll meet back again next week. And
Marvellous.
hopefully...
With Gary Schofield, hopefully.
With Gary. So I'm sure he'll have plenty of hot takes, mate.
Yeah, keep well, Gary. Don't catch COVID again this next 7
Put him
days.
in like a bubble or something, mate.
Yeah, we do need to do
Quarantine
that, don't we?
chamber.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right,
Brilliant.
mate. We'll see you next week. Eh?
Okay, thanks a lot.
Cheers.
Thanks, Jake.